We're going to present to you the 8 steps to exporting products of animal origin. AIO Partners has now been exporting with a wide range of clients from Fortune 500 companies to startup companies who want to start the process of exporting products of animal origin. And with our wide knowledge of database and us having a national um, spread of our official veterinarians, we thought it would be prudent to just go through with some of the steps and share some of the experiences that we've had with some of our clients in order to successfully export products of animal origin. So we've got these 8 steps that we're going to talk about and just give you some examples and some insights from our knowledge and experience of our database of the challenges that can be faced. But I'm always optimistic that once you've successfully achieved exporting, then the process should initially become from a learning analysis review to a business as usual, and that's where a lot of our clients have now gone down that journey of exporting for products of animal origin. So, products of animal origin, what are they? It's quite a large range: meat, milk, the standard ones, animal casings, honey, gelatin, highly refined proteins, snails, insects, and rendered. So there's quite a range of products of animal origin that require some form of official documentation, either an export health certificate or a private attestation, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Another definition would be to consider is composites. Composites are ultimately combinations of products of animal origin that must contain a plant-based origin. And so that also that they need to be integral in the final production. So it's clearly defined in terms of what a definition of a composite is. So you could require an export health certificate for a specific product of animal origin, but when you have a plant-based product in it, it's classified as a composite. So you could then have one certificate, which would be as a composite, which would have multiple combinations of products of animal origin within them. And we show here a decision tree, whether a product is composite or not. But mainly the key function is that if you've got products of animal origin, which is for non-technological reasons or for specific characteristics and flavor, then if they haven't got them for those reasons that you've got them, then they are not composite. If they are for other reasons for substance, and we talk about pizzas and cheesecakes is one, which is quite an interesting one, then they are all classified as composite products. The next point is once you've understood that your products fall under either a product of animal origin or a composite, you then need to find out the certification that may be required, either an export health certificate or a private attestation. And here there's some interesting things that we need to do. There's a few websites that we've put there. The first one is find the certificate. So the gov.uk site there helps you find the export health certificate. This is mainly for the EU, a lot of them there, but you may have some products which don't meet those criteria, or even you want to export even further out of afield from out of Europe to other countries, or in fact transiting through Europe into a third country. So what do you do? Well, if you find the certificate, hey, you're almost there. If you don't find it, then what the advice and recommendation as a learning is to contact the border control posts at the importing country, and they will advise you, or the importer at that, typically at that site, what documentation is required. And this is something we found particularly very useful if you are exporting to the Middle East, where there may not be the certificates that have been arranged, and in times they will be arranged as the EU is, as the UK has now left the EU, that they are having certain trade agreements and arrangements in terms of food standards and animal health safety that is considered. So that's one of the steps that I would look. And the second one that we tend to find a challenge is the export health certificates for the export is the HS codes. These are the harmonized system codes. typically on majority of all the export health certificates on the either the last page or the penultimate page, they have the typically 4 or 6 digit HS codes that are permitted on the certificates. And so again, we've seen a number of clients where they've correctly identified the HS codes, usually 6 or 8 digit. But unfortunately, when you come to completing the export health certificate, they don't mirror up. So it's something that you can need to check when you've identified the export health certificate. And that then opens up the question of, have you got the correct HS code or have you got the correct product in terms of your export health certificate? So that's one that I would always do a check to fix. And there's 2 websites there. One is the UK Gov, which we tend to find very easy, and there's also a European one to assist you as well to find that. The next thing is step 3. Check if your premises are approved. This is quite an interesting one. So if you are processing products of animal origin, then you will need to be on the EU approved list, and in particularly for traces. However, there are some areas where you may not be on have an EU approval, and these were where you are putting processed products of animal origin together, and you're not processing them. So a classic example would be someone who is making a cheesecake where you're putting all the components, the dairy, egg components together as a composite product because it may have a base, a pastry base there, but you won't be EU approved. So if you look at the composite certificates, they particularly say if available, and this can be quite a challenge for the certifying officer on what to put on the section where they're asking for the approval of the where you're assembling these products together. So this is one thing that I would always recommend. And finally, if you have a number of premises where you're getting your components for processed product animals, and particularly we look at this in the meat industry where you may have a pie or sort of beef jerky or whatever as an example, you may source it from multiple slaughterhouses. It's important that you ensure that they are all listed on traces. And the person who will probably assist you in that will be your customs broker when you're exporting. They'll probably be able to ensure that all the premises are on the traces. And it's not only just the traces that they need to be in there in terms of listing, but also to check that the scope of their activity is covered. Again, this sometimes we've found that some premises are listed as a cold store and yet they're actually a dairy establishment. So it's quite important to do that upstream work before you actually do it, because if you complete the certificate, and obviously they will be high chance they will be checked at the border control if they are on the traces as listed producers of products animals, it can cause challenges and delays and a lot of backwards and forwards in terms of getting emails to get your products through to the border control points. So yeah, I've just talked about that. Now, some of the premises are not EU approved. They may be registered. These are typically things like manufacturing plants who are producing pies or pizzas and things of that sort. And so they may not be EU approved, but again, you need to ensure that they are registered as well, and particularly also on traces would be of something that you need to look at. Step 4, health marking. So it's quite clear in terms of EU legislation that if you've got an approval premises, you will need to apply the health marking on that. One here that seems to be a bit of a cropper is if you're making particularly like cod liver oil capsules, you may contract your cod liver oil capsule production to an approved premises like fisheries oils that would be approved to fill in the gelatins, but then you may then get them in bulk and decanter them and put them into little bottles. That site actually would be classified as a wrapping and a packaging, so that would be the one where you'd need to put you'd need an EU approval, and that was what would be required on the final product in terms of health marking. Now, initially, there was a lot of variations we used to see of people using old health marks, which is definitely not permitted if you're exporting to the EU. But industry now seems to have addressed that. If you've got old health markings, then you can use that within the GB. There's a period of grace that allows that, but certainly for exporting, you must not have it must not have the words EC and UK on it. It must have GB, and there's a link there which shows you what sort of health marking. Another one is that you must have on your final packaging, if it's going to for retail for the final consumer, if you're exporting to the EU, you've got to have an EU address, and that can be any one EU address, but you've got to make sure that that address is comes under the legal entity. So in effect, it's frowned upon if you are using a solicitor's office, the PO box in the EU, and put that on the address. So you've got to make sure that you've got a legal entity that is registered under food law in terms of address on the packaging. So if there was any issues with in terms of the member states for a product recall, then they would be contacting those people in the actual EU where your address is packaged, has on your packaging. Um, Finally, once you've all done that, then you need to find your certifying officers. There's a lot of certifying officers there, but some of us are doing this full time. AIO Partners exclusively only just deals with exporting of products of animal origin, so we have quite a large database and large knowledge. Um, and so what we tend to do is we first review your process, similar to what we've already looked at. There will be sometimes some challenges in terms of this specific manufacturing operations and processes that we would have to look at. And one of the things we do is we have a 7-day operation, and we provide a consistent team, which is just purely all we do is exporting for our customers, for exporting products of animal origin. And certainly having an in-depth knowledge of exporting processes, we can also advise you about some of the challenges and some of the variations that can occasionally occur, but also preparation. We adopt the principle first time, right time in order to export your product. So a lot of upstream preparation work is done, and then we um, send our teams to deliver to complete the export health certification for you. Then you have to apply for the export health certificates when we're there. The UK is going through a transition period through what they call the DAS, Digital Assurance Scheme, where eventually they're going to digitalize it. There's links there which tells you how to order, the process of ordering an export health, and there was a document, there was a YouTube video. But AO partners, we have partners with a company called Vetted, where we have technology which is able to produce completed export health certificates, and test runs have shown that we can produce about 50 certificates in an hour. So that obviously reduces your cost and time, and also errors for the vets. But also, if there are variations in how specific member states require those export health certification in terms of filling in order to satisfy them, we can codify that with the software so we get a consistent feedback learning. We pretty much have done a lot of that in completion now because things are leveling off and it's stable. So we were successfully able to produce that electronically printed and typed export health certificates for you. And finally, another point just to bear in mind when you're applying for this, you have to list the border control post of where it's the point of entry. It's important to ensure that firstly they're listed or they're approved to accept border control for products of animal origin, but importantly to ensure that they're approved for the type or the scope. One to just consider is fisheries products. Certain border controls are not which you would assume would be accepting for fisheries, but they're not because they haven't got the appropriate arrangements or facility, or there's a neighbouring port which enables them to inspect that. So that's something to just review and check. And then we give you typically a standard operating procedure. So you tells you what we do, how we do the inspection, what is required, and the level of inspection that is required. And then some steps that we need that also come up is seals. So there's various types of seals that can be done. So if you're doing an entire container, then that's pretty straightforward. You can do a container seal, but there are also seals for pallet stacks, and this is particularly what we're seeing now increasingly with groupage, where you may not have an entire lorry of something like 32 pallets, but you may just have one or two, and it's being used as a various 3 or 4 methods of groupage process that you can do. And so you may want to pallet seal them, and we've got a database of the various types of seals that have gone through and have been successful. And so we can advise you basically to, if you just needed to export just 1 or 2 pallets, what to do. We recommend that we witness the sealing in order for us to put that on the export health certificate. Some border controls are saying that they require seals. Others are saying no. The view we take is if you don't seal it, you have a very high probability that your products will go for full inspection at the border control. So, again, the answer is, we try to ensure that you first time, right time, and making the operation as quick and efficient at your site so your customers receive your products as per stipulated on when you've got arrangements with them. But these are some things that a lot of people have asked us, do we need to be there? Well, we do if you want us to put that on the certificates. If not, then fine for some border control posts, depending on the type of product that is present there. But then you have a high chance of your products being fully inspected at the border control post. And then step 8, so veterinary arrangements. What actually we do, we talked a little bit about that. So on the day of the inspection, we do look at the products, check the health marking, addressing, labeling are correct, complete the paperwork, witnessing a handover, and at the moment it's talking that there are 24 hours that are required. There is some border controls who are reducing it to 4 hours, but it's something that you need to be aware, particularly for your products which are just in time. However, depending on some of our clients, we have managed to streamline that to a very efficient, particularly some sandwich operators where they've got a very just-in-time operation. We've agreed protocols and procedures for them to get that as efficient in terms of having a protracted shelf life for their customers at the point of sale. So that ultimately concludes what our process is. It's the 8 steps. It's something we would be happy to advise and guide. On our website, we've got our email address and contact details, and we're happy to advise you in terms of exporting, and look forward for you to contacting us. And wish you very much success in your operations. And what we also see is that once it's become business as usual, people just increase the scale and the scope, and that's the journey that it is. That you've in effect, what you created is a team which is ready for export, not only to the EU but to the rest of the world, and that's something that we are very optimistic that industry will now see themselves as not just exporting to Europe but everywhere else, and particularly as future trade agreements being made with other countries. I think the scope for Great Britain as a nation of grocers, as they've always said, is now going to be moving to a nation of exporters, certainly for products of animal origin. Thank you very much.